Welcome, everyone. Today, we will be tackling an exciting topic all about building connections internally and externally throughout your business and with vendors and relationship building. As you all know, probably the reason you're all here is knowing how crucial it is for legal teams to build solid internal and external relationships for smoother workflows, aligning better to your company goals, and really just knowing what's going on within the business. Krista and Ashley will be sharing some tips and tricks really to help cultivate these relationships, and hopefully you'll walk away with some tips for boosting your role as an in-house counsel. So with that, Ashley and Krista, can you please introduce yourselves?
Sure. So my name is Ashley Jones. I am commercial counsel here at Link Squares and have spent the majority of my legal career at least supporting sales teams in an in-house role. So I'm very excited to tackle this topic with Krista.
Hey, thanks, Ashley and Mary. I'm Krista Russell. Nice to see many of you again. I am Deputy General Counsel at Airbus, OneWeb Satellites. We mass manufacture and design satellites for low Earth orbit. I'm also an adjunct professor at the University of Miami School of Law, teaching transactional skills. And I love talking about all things in-house and in-house legal practice.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Excited to have you both. I don't want to belabor the agenda too much. We talked about it a little bit already, but really the goal here is to help you walk away with practical strategies and figure out those advantages of building strong business partnerships and what it looks like when those business partnerships aren't as strong and the issues that could arise. So let's start with the benefits of strong internal business partnerships. I'd love to hear from each of you really what the why is for those building of relationships and what it does for the company, and then what it also can do for you personally in building your brand. Krista, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So there's two components of this I look at of the why. The first why is because it's necessary. Like, you just cannot succeed as in-house counsel without building business partnerships. Like, it is what is asked of legal counsel. No longer is it okay to just be a subject matter expert in the law or your particular industry. You are now the business expert with legal knowledge that helps to facilitate the deal. So, like, the first reason is because you have to, right? There's just no way getting around it. The second reason touches a little bit on what you just said, Mary, about the personal branding, right? Like, there is a competitive advantage for attorneys that leverage business partnerships and relationships that, one, makes them more effective, two, allows their deals to get done, better and faster, which, I mean, is effective, but really it also just is a mindset that elevates that particular person and their role that the business sees them in. And then three, as I see it, like, it makes everything smoother when you have an understanding of who your business counterparts are, what the struggles they face, how the widgets are made, how the cash flows within your business, really understanding the business that you're in. You can get better deals done. You understand the struggles, the heartaches, where the bumps happen along the road. Maybe you've seen the problems, and then you also contract for them better in the future. So I really think it's both a necessary component, but also like a differentiator, when you're looking across the competitive landscape of in-house counsel.
I guess piggyback off of what Krista has mentioned, everything that she just said really goes to building trust within the organization. And that's how you can be the most effective in-house counsel and support system for your company, is by building those internal relationships. Then you're going to be actively brought in, kept in the loop. And when you're building your own internal knowledge that is based on your business strategy and your business structure, you are going to become a stronger, more effective leader and legal counterpart, which means, as Krista mentioned, faster deal flow, which is a good financial efficiency. You're going to be able to clear paths for some of your internal stakeholders to work on other items as well. So it really creates a well-rounded organization and is truly necessary.
So I'm curious, Ashley, like, because I know this has happened to me. Early on in my career, I've had people come to me and say, like, isn't it just faster if you stamp the contract at the end, right? Like, if you do like a last look at a document versus coming in earlier in the deal. Like I've had that argument made to me, like, no, actually, wouldn't it be faster if you just looked at these three things at the end? Like, have you kind of heard that from business people at any point?
Yes, I have, and it's funny because I think the way some business counterparts think about efficiency is a little skewed. They try to keep us out because they think that's going to be the most efficient approach, and then bring the last few items over to us. Wherein, if we're kept in the loop from the beginning, some of those issues may never even arise. We may be able to fill those faster and alleviate any concerns so that the deal, like we've been saying, gets pushed through faster. And I think that tweaking of the lens on efficiency and when you're supposed to be brought in, or when's the best time to be brought in, is really key to discuss within an organization.
I love that. I love the idea of reshaping the perspective and the way that you look at it. I know from my experience, like it takes a little bit of time to build that credibility, right? Some organizations you walk into, you already have that kind of seat at the table and it's already established. But other times you need to go in and kind of reset the tone. Maybe it's like an institutional culture thing where like there's more reactive use of legal counsel. And I mean, in my personal experience, like I'm not a deal killer. In fact, I kind of have this MO of trying to get a deal done the best way possible at any cost, if we can. And in fact, I just had this is like a big deal for me. I had my first deal ever die just 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, this doesn't feel good. But it wasn't because my team didn't involve me early, right? It was because there was just genuinely a point where an impasse that we couldn't go through. But truly, what I found, that remarkable time savings that happens is through that early engagement. And that early engagement can only happen when you build the relationships, right? Like when the team wants to seek you out versus like, I have to get legal approval on this particular contract, this deal, whatever it is. And I think that that's so critical. So the why, right, going back to the initial slide and the question here, is really to enable the business objectives.
Yeah, Krista, I'm curious, when that deal died, as you say, how do you kind of recover from that and continue with those strong relationships? Did it have any effect on those relationships? And if so, how do you rebuild from there?
Great question. We're figuring it out still. Is the most honest answer I can give you. I don't think there's any reputational impact of the business relationships because we were in it together. And really, I think I was the biggest advocate for proceeding on the deal. It wasn't that it wasn't my decision. It was that collectively we got to a point where we all believed it was better that we had to walk away from it. But truly, like I kept saying, like, is this real life? Is this happening? Like I've never had this happen before, not for lack of being in similar circumstances. I've been practicing for 15 years in-house, and it's just the first time a long extended life cycle deal got to the end and separated. So I don't think there's any damage to the relationship. And I think that's a testament to the work that was done, prior to the deal arising, but also being the partner in the deal. Like I mentioned, I was fighting for the deal. I was coming up with all of the solutions to be able to get it done. And that comes from my intimate knowledge of the business, which I've gathered over the years through these relationships. So like those relationships enabled me to come up with solutions that if I was just coming in at the last minute, I wouldn't have enough awareness or knowledge of to be able to even suggest.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. I was just about to say that. It sounds like the whole point of building those relationships is so when something like this happens, they know that it wasn't because you wanted that to happen. You were there
Correct.
with them. You were in the trenches, so to speak, with your team. Actually, I'm curious if you have any similar experiences.
I do, and it kind of juxtaposes Krista's pretty well because I actually did have a deal die because we were brought in too late. This was a situation where under a parent company, we had a sister company, and the salesperson on this deal pitched to a prospect that we would be able to contract with both entities under one agreement. All the terms would be fluid, matching, and they'd only get one invoice at the end of the day. But what was posed to the legal team was that oh, we want to try to create a uniform contract that blends our terms together. So we get onto this meeting, right? And we're being told, oh, well, the prospect is expecting the agreement at the end of the week. And we're like, wait, what we have to do is we have to speak to the finance teams, the other sales counterparts, the customer service teams, internal representation to make sure everything's aligned, because we're talking about two separate deal workflows, two separate complete systems in terms of provisioning services. And we tried really hard to really push this through and to get uniformity. But the further we dove into it, the more, I don't want to call them red flags, but the more flags we came across that were going to pose issues. And we had this prospect on the other end wondering where their contract was, because they were told they were going to be able to get this. It wasn't going to be an issue. So by the time we had got something together, they weren't satisfied because it wasn't as uniform and clean as they had wanted, because we were brought in too late, put under time constraints where we had to mend systems that really were not congruent at all. And at the end of the day, the deal did not go through, and we had to, work on rebuilding internal relationships with the sales counterpart who misrepresented to the prospect, but also we had to walk them through how to continue the relationship with the prospect so that once we are ready and aligned, let's go back to them, represent our unified approach, and let's get them back in the ballgame, because at the end of the day, that deal could have gone through if we were all ready and prepared. So let's get prepared and let's tackle it again. Nothing's truly lost in the water at that stage.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Kind of brings us to our next point about how do you actually build those relationships? So we've talked about why they're so important, great examples from each of you. But can we talk about really what those practical strategies are? How do you even go about making sure that everybody's on the same page? Or if you're not, how do you get there? Krista, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously you have some bullets here on the slides, but I'll let everyone read that while I kind of, share my outtake, off of that. The first, I mean, to build trust and credibility, which is necessary to form a relationship, just like in our personal lives, right? Like you have to be responsive as in-house counsel, and you have to be predictable. People have to know they're going to go to you, they're going to get a response in a reasonable time frame. And I'm not talking about like KPI metrics. I'm talking about just the personal attention and the personal pride in being responsive to your clients. And making sure, like we always have, I always call it like inbox FOMO. Like I'm always afraid of missing something, like to the point that I probably need to chill out on it a little bit, but like you have to be responsive to your clients. They have to know that you're going to be there. Then you have to think about it as like a dating relationship. You have to demonstrate interest, right? You have to ask questions that help you understand what your business is doing. You have to stop and think of solutions creatively sometimes that are outside of the box and that enable what they are trying to do. So like it's it's a like it's like you're dating your business colleagues, but in a totally HR okay way. Like you're trying to get just build that relationship the same way you would in any other relationship. Like you're trying to work on a relationship with your teenager, right? Like you have to ask questions about things they're interested in. You have to speak their language, right? Like my stepdaughter says things all the time. I'm like, oh my God, I have to translate on Google. What is she even saying? Right. But like understanding the language of your business colleagues is the same thing, right? Like you have to know the various acronyms and technology terms and all of the things that they are dealing in so that you can be responsive to that as well. That's part of your business knowledge, your business acumen, right? You're understanding who your competitors are, what their market share is, how different dynamics might change that, where your company fits and what your competitive advantage is. Like it's getting interested, being embedded in with them, right? Being asking the questions that show not show off your knowledge, but that really just show your thinking about it, right? Like it's Valentine's Day month, right? Like it's February, like like you love when your significant other demonstrates that they're thinking of you, right? Like it's the same thing in a business relationship. You have to demonstrate that you've actually like spent the time to understand it, to get to know it, and then to think of meaningful questions that would arise and allow you to understand a deal better.
Definitely. Krista, I love something that you say, which is you need to steer away from just being like a legal person and be a business person that has a legal background. So can you speak to that a little bit? I think that
Yeah,
that's
sure. It's my favorite. I mean, this is my brand, right? I'm not the lawyer. I'm a business lawyer, and business is before lawyer. Okay. I know that's true of other kinds of lawyers, family lawyer, criminal lawyer. It doesn't mean you're a criminal before you're a lawyer. But in this context, as a business lawyer, like, it's business first. I am an arm of the business. I am working towards the business objectives, and I'm doing so with a legal lens, but that legal lens is almost like ancillary to the actual business knowledge that I have. I want my colleagues to come to me like I'm a COO and a strategist, and I run operations, and I just happen to have this wealth of legal knowledge that I paid a lot of money for. Like, that's how I want them to look at me. It's all about, and so I put myself out there, not as Krista lawyer hat, right? I'm wearing the like business operations, marketing, HR, like all of the other engineering, too much engineering, frankly, for my brain. Like, I'm wearing those hats and pushing myself and trying to understand those various functional departments and roles. And then I bring in the legal, position and posture to it. Because the fact of the matter is, lawyers are taught how to think really well. The best and worst part of law school is the first year where you're taught to think like a lawyer, right? Every relationship is ruined for the rest of time after that. Right? Like, but we know how to think and analyze problems really well. So when we actually have a deeper understanding of all of these other areas that make our business objectives, plausible, then we really can be a real differentiator, to our, and adding immeasurable value to our businesses, I think.
definitely. Ashley, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, just that, becoming that business person first and letting the legal follow that. A good thing that really helps with that is just being visible within the organization. Whether that's getting on business unit leadership teams, doing one-on-ones with your business unit leaders, getting more
Hey, how do you
involved.
get on a business unit leadership team?
Well, you have to have business units first, but I actually had to go through this previously where we had a product development team, and they were meeting all the time to get new products added, and they weren't looping in legal. So then when they would ask for a contract or an agreement for something, we'd be like, well, we don't understand what's actually being done, and we need to understand it so that we can tailor the contract to protect your service offering and the organization in the best way possible. So we did create a product development unit leadership team where whenever there was a new product that was getting rolled out, it was someone from sales, someone from the service, someone who was developing the product on the ground, finance, sales operations, and legal, all getting together to discuss the nuances of the product to ensure that we had the contract ready to go. We were able to roll it out smoothly without any issues. Sorry. Marketing, of course, was on this leadership team, Mary, I swear. And what that meant was we had like 1 or 2 meetings and then the contract rolled out. So it was just a really smooth, efficient process. And that comes with being visible, but also, like you said, just being tuned into your business. If you know that these things are happening without legal oversight or inclusion, you can, put your foot in the door, wedge it open and say, hey guys, I'd love to hear more about this. I'd love to know what's going on. And then, you're seen as an additional knowledge bank, not a scary lawyer. You're part of the business and you're just looking to create the best solutions possible.
How does training come into play here? What are some things that anybody on this call can take back in terms of training to get maybe the sales team on board or any other business functions? I feel like it'd be helpful to have that information too.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a very atypical answer, so let's let Ashley go first.
I can speak to training specifically from like a sales legal partnership and the importance there. When you're working through the deal cycle with a sales counterpart and some common issues come up that they may not understand fluently, and they may be quick to tell the prospect, yeah, we can totally agree to this, without knowing the underlying, reasoning or impact behind it, that creates turmoil and issues. So I think having open sessions and actively or proactively training on some of the legal nuances in the agreement, some things that salespeople can watch out for or proactively speak to without getting legal involvement is really key. And that also goes for the vendor side too. I love working with my internal business partners on vendor deals where they're able to go in and negotiate for certain termination rights because we've given them that training on the impact of having those. So then we're kind of reviewing and just making sure the language is good. And I love when that happens.
Krista, what's your
So
atypical answer?
I have a very, it's not different than Ashley's. It's different than just about everyone else's position on this. So it's not about Ashley. I really believe that when in-house lawyers particularly do a lot of trainings or just any amount of trainings with business, with sales, whatever, we separate ourselves from the business and kind of make ourselves on a pedestal versus next to each other, kind of hand in hand on a deal. So what I do, I believe in baptism by fire, right? I believe in just going in and doing it with them, right? Like we're going in and we're working a deal together and we're learning how we work alongside of each other. They're learning stuff about how I'm negotiating, or we're strategizing in sessions before we go into negotiations. And similarly, I'm learning a bit about their business in the process as I'm asking the questions along the way, versus the create a playbook kind of mentality, or let's just engage in regular trainings where like I'm up here, you're down there, and I'm teaching you how to do, I don't want to say my job. It's not that concerned for me that I'm worried that like a salesperson's going to come and, end up negotiating the deals and they won't need me anymore. I believe in educating, but I don't believe in like educating in like formal ways. I think that going and doing it and kind of just being in there together, hand in hand, is the best way to train your business teams in doing it. It's also the best way, I think, to train more junior lawyers, right? Come to the negotiation with me, join the call with me, whatever it is, versus like, let me teach you how to do it. And every company I work for or have worked for is like, you're crazy. And then we end up doing it that way. And it seems to go okay. We don't eliminate training, of course. There's lots of necessary trainings that happen. But as for the like push away from kind of playbook based training, or like teach you how to negotiate a particular clause or what it means training, we stepped away from those, and I'm not sad about it.
Yeah, it sounds like the alignment there is really what you're kind of alluding to. It's like we're together in this. So let's do it as one team. I love that. Shifting gears a little bit here, let's talk about external business partnerships. Ashley, I know this is something that you have extensive experience with, being on more the commercial contract side. Can you speak to really what the advantages are here? I know you talked about a little bit with explaining like a deal may never be dead as long as you continue those relationships. So can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is really key in all relationships, is being accountable, listening to the counterpart, understanding the pros and cons of any relationship, and really also assessing your own strengths and weaknesses and how you can bring those to the table to contribute to maintaining an external relationship or even building one. And this is something that can be done through whether that be the negotiation process, maintaining a positive communication structure and atmosphere, coming to it knowing that there is a person on each end of it. While we're here to conduct business, we're also here to build a relationship that can go beyond this one deal. And then, you can bring what we offer to the table to your affiliates, your friends, anyone else who may be interested in what we're offering, and really empowering internal business stakeholders to do the same, and to understand that increase in trust and maintaining accountability, doing what you say, is really what's going to drive those strong external relationships in both a sales context and a vendor context, because your vendor can just as quickly become one of your customers if that relationship is maintained and strong.
Absolutely. Krista, anything to add there?
Yeah, so I feel like the timing of this webinar is just so perfect because I mentioned, right, that like my first big deal died 2 weeks ago. And I probably wouldn't have had a personal story to tell, but for the timing of this webinar and that. So let me just add, like, I've thought a lot about, in the last 2 weeks as I'm like mourning the death of this deal. I've thought a lot about like what that, any pieces along the way or places where like a different, step could have been taken that could have changed something. And really, I think the answer is no. And I had a follow-up call yesterday with external counsel, CEO of the company, and another VP in the business organization. That was just like hey, like we have a lot of respect for you, and like thanks for your advocacy for like trying to make this happen. Like we think we were really close, and like let's keep talking. Who knows if we're in a different position in a couple months, right? And like I didn't think anything of it from an external partnerships like perspective until I'm just sitting here, during this very webinar and listening to Ashley, and I'm like, you know what? That's a real testament to the trust that the other side had as well. Like that we were really, even though we were on opposite sides of the table, working towards the same goal, which was to try to get a deal done. And who knows what that means? Maybe the deal actually isn't dead. Maybe in a couple months, like it gets revived or it, evolves into something a little bit different. And I think that like when you talking about the advantages, like that's straight business advantage. Yes, I love the compliments that they made to me in the call, right? I love that they said it in front of like key executives in my organization, especially because we're like in a new, like we're post M&A activity right now. And so like there's a little bit of, who knows what I do in the organization and is it important? So like that's all very flattering, but really what I'm left with thinking is like maybe there actually is some hope for this deal in a couple weeks, in a month, when there's a market change, when like there's a stock change, who knows, right? Like, and I think that is an invaluable add to, to the company, like, because maybe but for those relationships and but for them feeling like I was really invested in making the deal happen as well, that maybe those conversations wouldn't happen and like we wouldn't be walking away like with those good feelings. And that doesn't mean every deal will do that, right? Like that's not the expectation. I've certainly been parts of deals that went through that didn't feel nearly as good.
Mhm.
But I think that really the advantages, to those really benefit, yes, me as an individual, but mostly the company.
Absolutely. I think that really goes back to that reputation piece, and then also just building credibility internally and externally. And I'm curious if either of you have any ways in which you would help our audience think of like a good way to really build those external business partnerships. Krista, maybe like how you went about this last deal so that
Yeah.
they were giving you those compliments in front of your executive team. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I have two thoughts. The first, impeccable integrity.
Mhm.
One thing, because so much of it is reputation based, one thing that we can all control is our integrity and the way that we act, right? That can be small things like turning a red line to the other side when you said you're going to.
Mhm.
It's demonstrating your honesty, your trustworthiness at every single turn, so that credibility is as high as can be. Because sometimes when you're really close to a deal getting done and both sides are at like the 11th hour, sometimes that trust will get you over the line. Okay, so like that's not why I have what I call impeccable integrity, but it's not a bad thing, right? Like, and handling myself with the highest ethical standards and operating in the best faith and giving people the benefit of the doubt at every turn is really, really important to me in my professional life.
I can talk transparency and throughout the process to kind of tack on to what Krista was talking about integrity wise. Being transparent throughout any negotiation process or relationship building process is really important. You know, there may be instances and times where there's an ask on the table that, you know, is something you're never going to be able to agree to or get approved. And instead of really dancing around that, sometimes it's just best to be like, hey, we're not going to be able to do this, but let's talk about a solution that's going to be more workable. And, you know, let's dive further into your concerns and what you're thinking of so that I can understand it better and we can come to a solution that's going to be beneficial for both of us. And being able to kind of assess those before beginning that relationship is really key and important too. And that comes with understanding the why behind why legal is involved, of course, in building that partnership and what it means to the business. You know, what are the benefits to the external partnership? You know, if it goes beyond being just a customer or being a vendor, if there's like a sponsorship or some really great reputational traction that can come out of it, understanding what that means and being able to tie that into building the relationship, tie that into the negotiation process, you know, tie that into the small talk we do beforehand, during, throughout, and really driving home that you are there through and through, not just to build the relationship, but to maintain it. You know, you're not going to just disappear into thin air once it's all said and done, but like you are a solid business counterpart who's there to see and maintain the success of their relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ashley.
I love that. The second way that I think you build it, you know, the trust, respect, and all of the transparency that comes from that. The slide says understanding why legal is involved. It's also understanding your own why, which to me translates in a much less professional way to figuring your shit out, right? Like I talk about this so much, like understanding who you are as a person, what makes you tick, your own personal triggers, your biases that you enter negotiations with, your unhealed childhood wounds that make you need to be heard, right? Like the things that affected us growing up, the needs we have in our professional lives, relationships that make us need to be the last voice heard in a room or the last comment in a negotiation. Like those things all work towards allowing you to practice, as I always say, at the top of your license. It allows you to be the best version of you, and not to get philosophical here, but that goes so far when you're trying to build that credibility and those relationships with people internal or external. So figuring your stuff out, figuring out what you need, what you don't need, and like when you can just let go, you know, when you can stop with the quick catty response in an email, right? Like when you can just move forward so that you can actually achieve the objective is critical. I think it's a much overlooked part because it's a soft skill, right? It's not a, you know, study this line or read this business industry, you know, publication. It's much softer than that, but it's so critical to lawyers in any part of practice, but particularly those that negotiate live.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anything, that's the most important internal partnership to master before, you know, tackling other ones.
Oh, so good. So good. Take that
Put that
nugget.
on a t-shirt. I love that. That's great. Yeah, I think that holds true for anything though, right? Taking a beat and really like remembering what those mutual goals and objectives were or are. Like Krista, you mentioned the catty response in an email. Is that really going to get everybody to the end goal, the end objective? So I think that that's a really, really great point to make personally and professionally, truthfully. Yeah. So.
And as good as that feels sometimes, that catty response or like the obvious no kidding response, like it doesn't feel as good as getting the deal done.
Absolutely. Can we talk about maybe what a successful business partnership looks like? I think you both alluded to the fact that your favorite lawyer answer here is it depends, which I totally understand. But can you think of maybe your favorite relationship that you have internally or externally and what that looks like, and maybe how you even establish that. We'll start with you, Krista.
My my best relationships internally are ones that started poorly, like with someone with a predisposed notion of what working with legal counsel was like, someone who is, a sales guy or girl that writes their own contracts and thinks they don't need like legal support. I love just talk about working out your stuff, right? Like I love working with difficult people. I love it. I particularly love when they have like a very strongly formed opinion about what working with me is going to be like, not based on myself, but like their other experiences. So like those transformations are so like worthwhile to me, and they're like my best, professional friendships. But really, they look like legal being a business person. They look like not legal being the rubber stamp and high volume contract pusher, right? They look like sitting right next to the business team in early conversations, right? Like sometimes before the NDAs are signed, and not because you need a lawyer to write the NDA, right? Like they're talking about just being there in the room where it happens, to, kind of quote Hamilton. Like it's just about being there. It's about the natural conversation, not like, oh, let's not say this because legal might, they might say no. Like it's that wanting to be there side by side. Like I have a business colleague now, probably one of my best professional relationships, and she's like, I don't go anywhere without my business partner. She doesn't even call me legal counsel. Like occasionally she'll refer to me that, but it's always like, I don't go anywhere without my business partner, and she's talking about me. Like, and I love that. And so I think that's some healthy signs.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that you just said just brought to me that like what I think of being what a successful partnership looks like is we're getting rid of the notion of asking for permission or asking for forgiveness, and we're just discussing. We're just talking it through. It's not like, oh my gosh, I've got to ask and see if this is going to be okay. You're just like, well, what do you think about this?
Mhm.
And then it's not coming to me after something's been done that may need to be fixed. It's knowing that you can come whenever to have that conversation to discuss anything. I am your partner, not your roadblock or your bulldozer. We're partners walking through everything together, step by step.
I don't know if it is just because it's February or like what it is about this particular webinar, but I cannot help but make continual analogies to like personal relationships, right? Like you could be in a marriage and a relationship where you go and buy a brand new car and don't consult with the other person, right? Or you can be like, hey, I saw this Honda's having a great deal on what, like you could just kind of collaborate the entire time and then work together to achieve your goals. You could, have kids and one of you could just discipline them one way and another the other way, or you could talk about it and see like what's the best way for the two of you to get, whatever objective you're trying to achieve, like from your children. If it's listening, if it's, doing their homework, whatever it might be, like it's just that spirit of collaboration that I think is so analogous to personal relationships. That is really, because it is a relationship, right? Like your relationship with your colleagues internally or externally is a relationship. So at the end of the day, it's going to have the same rules and parameters that personal ones would.
Definitely. Those commercials always, Krista, during the holidays where they
And they
just
come and put a bow on the car, and you're like, you spent $50,000 without telling your partner?
it's a
What?
surprise. Yeah. Yeah. But thank you both. Those are really great insights. And from my own perspective, kind of an outside perspective on the marketing team, something that I so appreciate about our legal team is it always does feel like a discussion when I need to ask about something. It's not, oh, I need Ashley's permission to do X, Y, and Z, or I need to make sure Ashlyn will tell me that this is okay. It's more so I'm asking them because I really appreciate their input and they'll help me get to the end goal that we're all looking to achieve.
Yeah.
So as someone who's a business function, I appreciate that. Fantastic. So I just want to get your last key takeaways here before we wrap up. I know we're nearing time. So is there anything else that the two of you want to add for our audience today?
I really love this last bullet point about the traditional boundaries that used to separate legal are gradually disappearing. I would like to have no boundaries. They're not disappearing, they just don't exist. Because if we're all working as a collaborative unit, as a business, all for the same goals and outcomes, you know, like I said, we're walking step by step throughout each process, and we're building those relationships together and not siloed. That's something that I think is really, really important for in-house counsel to take away, is that, you know, if there are boundaries, if you're seeing them, you know, do whatever you can to remove them, to become that collaborative business partner within your team.
Yeah, and I would just add that I hear all the time in CLEs, webinars, you know, lawyers encouraging alignment with the business. And I would just stress that if you have these relationships, you don't need to work on alignment because you're already aligned. Like if you're standing side by side, your colleagues, or even in the example I mentioned, like the team across the table, you can still be working towards the same objectives. And sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. But either way, you will be aligned. And I think that that maybe is the actual best measurement of what the successful partnerships look like, is that natural alignment. You don't have to work towards alignment. You are aligned. And I think legal counsel is almost dangerous to, you know, to outside, you know, companies. Like if I'm aligned with my business, like the deals that I can get done are wildly beneficial for my company, right? Like I know what I can do is much more exciting. I say dangerous for, you know, another party, but I don't actually mean dangerous, right? Like it just means that I can really like do my best work with that kind of alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very close to time, and we did have one question come in that I think is really interesting, especially Krista, you mentioning about that bad relationship maybe that you had, but is now one of your best. The question is, what are some steps you can take to help rebuild a relationship that is on the rocks?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it depends. Is it on the rocks and you just walked into it? Is it on the rocks because of you, basically, because of your organization, or just because of a different experience they had with a different person, right? So, I mean, there might be a little bit different, but it's not any different than the same that you would go if you're starting from scratch, right? Like you're demonstrating interest in what you know, what they're doing and why. Not interest so that you can correct it, not interest so you can fix it, just genuine interest. How does this work? Everybody feels special, important when somebody demonstrates interest in what they're doing, but you're doing it for a purpose, not just to learn, but also to foster that relationship. Showing up, right? Being responsive and predictable and doing what you say you're going to do, you know, builds that trust and credibility. And then there's the magic part, which is just demonstrating the value. When you have a chance, you have to be ready for it, to add value to their deal, to whatever it is that that business counterpart is working on, and they see that. I do think that's kind of like the Titanic shifting away from the iceberg, you know. And I know the Titanic hit the iceberg, so hopefully in these examples that doesn't happen. But I think that that's really critical. So it's really the same steps that I think, and sometimes the best way to repair relationships is a little bit of time and continuing to hold your head up high, you know, in the interim, not being too good to fix it.
Yeah, and I think understanding why the relationship was on the rocks, specifically from the counterparty's perspective, is really important, because you're demonstrating interest in their concerns or what issues they have, and walking into that conversation not being led by fear or being afraid of what they're going to tell you about the rocky relationship, and being receptive of the feedback, and not really flinching at it, because then you're showing, you know, I'm here to listen to you, and now we're gonna rebuild. We're going to focus on the positives, and if there are things we are able to fix and remediate immediately, of course, we'll do that by taking all the steps that Krista mentioned. And if there are things we need other people to come in and step in and do, we're going to go have those conversations with our internal business teams so that we can put our best face forward internally or externally.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. And thank you everyone for joining today. We hope you enjoyed this. And we will be sending out the recording after, just so you can have this in your back pocket. And we'll send out the slides as well. So thank you all so much. And we hope to see you on another one soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.